What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Crew First Culture Podcast. This is Jeremy. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today. Jumping right into lesson number 3 of the series of leadership lessons learned. This is going to be a little bit of a more difficult one for me to really, persuade everybody out there, because it really goes against almost everything that we are taught and we learn as leaders. It's about expectations, creating expectations, and you know having those from the standpoint of a formal leader, whether that's a station captain, a battalion chief, whatever. And all of this in my world completely changed on the day that we recorded episode 121 with Benjamin Martin. That episode is titled Expectations, Why They Fail, and What We Should Focus on Instead. And it truly was a pivot point in how I approached leadership. And so it kind of evolves around a story that Benjamin tells about an issue that he had in his career that he had to deal with. And one of the people working under him basically called him out for having such an exhaustive list of expectations. And kind of the paraphrased short version of this story is, if we have these lists that are probably pages long, first of all, as leaders, are we able to just regurgitate those from memory? If that's what your list looks like, probably not, right? And so that leads us to some very important questions. If you aren't able to just say what your list is off the top of your head because you know it, then you basically have to have the paper physically in front of you, or whatever that has all this stuff on it in front of you. And so just kind of staying on that track, if you have to have it in front of you to remember all of these things, how do you expect your people to remember all these things? These are your expectations. These are coming from you, what's important to you, your priorities, and all of these things that you feel important enough to write down and to share with your people. They're not their expectations, they're not their priorities. And so they're far less likely to remember them as well as you do, yet you can't even remember them. So facetiously, he basically is saying, what do you ask your people to carry around this list all the time so that they have it in front of them? Obviously, the answer is no. So the next question is, then how do you expect them to live up to these expectations that nobody is really going to get into the weeds and remember at the depth that you're creating them? And so for me, that was really eye-opening. I really had to think about that, because I wasn't somebody that just had pages and pages of expectations. But where I was at that point in time, I was trying to create something special. I was trying to make a lot of changes to the culture and create an identity that was extraordinary compared to the norm. And so, yeah, there was a lot of stuff that I had written down that I thought was important to kind of share and to ask of my people. And so the next layer to all this is to tearing apart this list of expectations. First of all, anything that's already being met by the crew that you're with, does it really even need to be in there? If one of my expectations is every call, we're all going to have seatbelts on, does it really do me any good to have that written down and to preach it every time we do or do not look through our list of expectations to the people that are below me, if they always wear their seatbelts, if I never have any issues with that? To me, it's almost like you're saying, I'm not paying attention to what you're doing but I'm going to sit here and tell you what I expect from you. Okay, if you're doing it, that's fine, but I'm still going to talk because I like to hear myself talk. If if a crew is doing something and doing it well that you would have on your expectation list without you even breaching the subject, I don't think it should even be on there. It's already being done. Give your crew the respect that they deserve for doing what you expect before you even ask it. The next level of all this is when you're breaking down your expectations, do you have any that are previously covered in policies and procedures? So again, if we have a policy or a procedure or a guide or whatever your department calls it, that everybody has to have a seatbelt on when they're in a fire truck, why would it make sense to take up space on my list and muddy the waters of other things that are probably more important to me by having that in there when it's already a procedure, it's already a policy? Again, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's already covered, it's redundant, and really it's those things that kind of start turning people off to listening to anything else. So like I said, you're really muddying the water. If let's just make it simple. You let's just say you have 10 things, 10 bullet points on your expectations list. You've got two of them that they're already doing every day, every time, without fail, doing great at it. You've got three of them that are already covered in policies and procedures. So really the five that we're discussing right there are taking up space and using up our leadership capital for no reason. And then when it comes to the other five, the ones that are probably the most important because they're not covered in policies, they're not something that the crews are doing or at that level yet. That's the important stuff. And I've already turned them off to this whole thing because they're having to sit here and listen to me go through my list of expectations for an hour and their eyes are glazed over. So, first of all, just cutting out all of that stuff, at the very bare minimum, having expectations, if that's something you can't let go of, or if it's something that your current situation is requiring, which I'll get into here in a little bit, then at least minimize what that list looks like and cut out anything that isn't necessary, isn't required. So that led to the next question. And again, please go back and listen to episode 121 because it's coming from the expert's mouth, not mine. But if we are to say, okay, I'm on board, I will drop my expectations. So now what? Well, what do I do instead? And so for me, as I made that decision and as I had to kind of work through that for myself, it really turned into those expectations were really replaced by the culture, the culture that both we were where we were at, and even more so, the culture of what we were striving to be. And so the the way things read were basically we are the crew that does this. We are a crew that does this. And that's how it was. It's me laying out things that I expect from you. It's so much easier to palate when it's in that format. And so, just looking at kind of one example, if we're talking about one of your expectations is something around the realm of, I expect you to do some type of training every day. We as a crew are going to train on something every day. Okay, that's an expectation. And again, it's not a bad expectation, especially if it's a crew that isn't doing that. But what I turned that into is basically a description of the culture that we were creating. And so I changed that statement into this: we are a crew that strives to learn and grow every day. And so hopefully I can kind of, hopefully I'm explaining myself well enough. It's not like we are saying, okay, there are no expectations. Guys just go do what you do and we'll figure it all out. No, we're just, we're putting it in a different format. We're changing it from something that a higher person on a pedestal is looking down upon his people and giving out these commandments. We're changing that into this is who we are and this is who we are striving to be. So these are the things we are going to do to get us to where we want to be. And that's kind of the mindset of it. And I I truly felt like it was a great shift for us in how accepted these things were, how palatable these things were, how much more involved the crew was when we kind of talked about it, as opposed to other times previously when I read, a page and a half of expectations to them. So that's kind of the overall idea of it. We're maneuvering from that commandment style expectation list into a more we centered, we are together, this is where we're going to go and this is how we're going to get there situation. Another kind of piece of this is by doing this, it really allows us to be autonomous as far as decisions within the crew and individually, because we have a meter and a ruler that we can measure off of. We all know what we're striving to be. It says it right there in our list of culture goals. Does this decision that I'm about to make, if I make it this way, is it going to get me closer to that goal that we're striving for as a culture? Or is it going to take me farther away? And that's what we use as a barometer to help us decide where to go and what choices to make. So it was really helpful in that way. Another thing about all of this is, again, I understand the role of expectations. I understand that there has to be something. When I was in this transition, I had already have a pretty good foothold on the changes that we were making, the excuse me, the culture that we were creating and the goals that we were aiming for. And so it was a easier transition because that conversation and those those topics had already been talked about a lot. And so transitioning from what I expected to what we are as a crew, the identity and the goal that we were chasing, it was a pretty easy transition. So, what is the difference between that and somebody that goes into a situation that doesn't have that foundation? Or you go into a situation where you don't have anybody that knows who you are or knows anything about what you want accomplished. Well, you might have to start with some expectations. Again, keep it to the minimum and keep it concise and really the things that really matter. Keep it to that. But if you need to have expectations at first, that's fine. You can always make that transition like I did later on. But ultimately, I think the best way to communicate what we expect from our people, hands down, is to model it by the actions and the choices and the behaviors that we make every day. That's the ultimate way of communicating what we expect. If we expect our people to train on something a little bit at least every day, then we better be in there every day doing it ourselves. If we expect everybody to wear a seatbelt, we better be wearing a seatbelt. If we expect everybody to be working out, we better be working out. Use your model, use your embodiment as what you expect from people. Because if I'm doing something that I know is the right thing, if I am leading in a way that, in my opinion, is the best way to do it, that's the easiest way to show them how to go about their day as well. And so that's important to me. I think it's truly important to be a part of what is going on, and to lead by example, not just a cliche that you hear 1,000 times, and it just kind of washes away. Truly lead by example, and let that be the call to them of how to act and how to behave. And so the last thing that I have on here is, all of this is Benjamin Martin's fault. I can give you his email or whatever, and you can send your disgruntled comments to him. But something that I obviously jokingly said to him is, it's like, he's done this to me several times. He has completely ruined an entire mindset or an entire way of thinking for me with his genius or his brains or whatever you want to call it. He ruins everything. So it's his fault. But like I said, you know, all of these things are subjective. All of these things, you take what you will, and hopefully gain a little bit of something and use what you can. But I will say, just in summing it up, if you feel like you have to have expectations, keep it at a minimum. Keep it to where it is something that is easily digested, that you can remember without having it in front of you, so that they can remember by having it in front of them. But if you are tied to expectations, start working on wrapping your head around how you can transition into that more of a culture goals type list instead of expectations. Because I truly think, and I truly saw it in real life. It made a big difference. So that's all I got today. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time. Please like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channels, the Instagram, Facebook, anything you can, and support the Crew First mission. I appreciate your support. So, as I say here lately, remember, it doesn't matter what you come from or where you come from. Great things can come from you. Thank you.